This week in Pure Reinvention.
Well, I think there's very little in this day and age that hasn't already been tried. So why not learn from the people that did it?
Episode 88, Mindy Bradish-Orta, President and Executive Director, Jackson County Chamber of Commerce and Experience Jackson.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this episode of Pure Reinvention, where we create space for the unexpected by inspiring a reinvention lifestyle. Mindy had so many cool things to say, Jody.
Yeah, Mindy's one that I think we could have made 3 or 4 podcasts out of, really. And so Mike and I met Mindy at about the same time, and we're just really taken with her clarity of thought and her ability to get things done in a really collaborative way. So I think you're in for a real treat.
I think you're exactly right. Let's listen.
This week's episode is sponsored by MB Strategies. MB Strategies focuses on your success and provides you with sustainable results by identifying opportunities, guiding you through implementation, and navigating you to greater results. Contact MB Strategies today at mbstrategiesllc.com to start your reinvention journey.
Of the 5 steps in the reinvention process, which step do you most closely associate yourself with?
For me personally, it's probably more move, and almost to a fault. I would say that there are times when I need to slow down and bring others along with me, stop the process, take time to reflect. I'm very much a doer. Get it done. Let's get it done. Let's go. What are we spending all this time spinning wheels on? So it's move.
Question number 2, what is your superpower?
I think that I recognize that I don't always have the answers, that I'm not always the expert. And if there is a superpower in that, it is that I am humble enough to admit I don't know. I like to ask advice. I like to not be the smartest person in the room. In fact, surround myself with people who are smarter, not because I'm dumb, but because I'm always looking to learn and grow.
Finally, when was the last time you did something outside of your comfort zone?
I strive every day to push myself and to challenge myself. I try not to take the same route to work every day. I try to not run the same distance or same way every day. So I would say that today I pushed myself outside my comfort zone, having some tough conversations, slowing down, recognizing that because I'm really passionate about something and ready to move, not everyone else is. So it's outside my comfort zone sometimes to just really stop and be still and reflect and then bring others along with me.
Tell us a little bit about your work as the Jackson County Chamber of Commerce.
Well, it's the perfect job for me. Chambers of Commerce, they have a saying, if you've seen one chamber, you've seen one chamber. We're known for your typical networking events, your publications. We all have a lot of the same elements, but it really is the people in the community that make up a chamber. And I ran the West Hollywood, California Chamber for a while, and now the Jackson County Chamber. And they are very different entities, both nonprofits that have chamber tools and resources, but they are very different just because of the people and needs of the community. So in my role, I do a lot of the legislative and advocacy, of course, the strategic planning and visioning, oversight of the volunteers, the board, and the staff. And in Jackson, we've struggled. I came in 2007, worked through 2008, 2009. It's a manufacturing community that really suffered during the downturn. And now we're seeing a resurgence. There's a faith and a trust that the rough times are past us and we can reinvest in our community and ourselves and our business. And we're starting to see that. And the chamber has been there through the hard times, the thick times, and really supporting our members and adapting right to what their needs are. Their needs 10 years ago were very different than they are today. Today, we're talking about workforce and how do we fill all these jobs? And that was not the conversation before. The conversation was our unemployment rate is high. What are we going to do with all these people out of work? How do we retrain them? How do we reconnect to them? So the Chamber of Commerce for me is the perfect job because I get to talk to a variety of people, a variety of businesses whose needs vary every day, not to mention year to year. And, we're not saving puppies or curing cancer, which is always hard when you're trying to raise money. But at the same time, when rising tides float all boats, we all win when our economy is doing well and people are in good paying jobs and our businesses are succeeding and reinvesting in the community.
What is your title there?
I'm the president and CEO of the Jackson County Chamber of Commerce.
So with that title, you are also introducing something very important to the chamber world, which is this thing called reinvention. Can you tell us about why that was important to you?
So it's the Anchor Initiative, and we mirrored it after Midtown Detroit, with the concept being of reinventing downtown Jackson. It had kind of become a wasteland. There wasn't a lot going on. You could bowl down the streets on the evenings and weekends, and that's all changing. New restaurants are opening. We're bringing in apartment buildings, hotel development. All of our old empty storefronts are getting full, and it's very exciting. We have 3 main initiatives. It is to live local, buy local, and invest local. I've been on the board of directors since its inception. What's particularly exciting about it right now is that the executive director is leaving. So there's a search committee that has been looking for a new leader. And they have decided that they would like to partner with the Chamber of Commerce. So in Jackson, the Chamber of Commerce shares space with Experience Jackson, which is our visitors bureau, and I oversee both. This will be a partnership between the 3 organizations. So it is a synergy of missions. There's efficiencies in the work being done. A lot of our work crosses over community economic development. So it's an exciting time to see what's happening down there and how we all get to play a part in it while being responsible with the limited resources we have.
Now, this Anchor Initiative, and in particular, you mentioned municipalities having limited resources. You also talked about going and patterning yourself after someone who had already been into this initiative. Tell us more about the importance of patterning after one who already has some lessons learned.
Well, I think there's very little in this day and age that hasn't already been tried. So why not learn from the people that did it? I always like to reach out, benchmark against other organizations, areas, communities, whatever it may be, to see what worked for them, what didn't work, what stumbling blocks they ran into. One of my other favorite questions is, what roadblocks, what brick wall will I run into that I don't even see coming? Right. So if someone else has already hit it, why? I'm going to save my face.
Yeah, nice to have a heads up, huh? Yeah.
And not run into that same obstacle and hurdle. And not that every situation will be the same, but we can always learn from the experiences. And when I met you and learned about the Pure Reinvention model, it just made so much sense to bring this tool to our community so that they can learn the steps and the process. We can talk about it and everyone can say, yeah, reinvention is great, but what does that really mean? So to bring forward the process to them that they can implement is fulfills the chamber mission.
So what you're talking about is beginning to put a lot of energy towards this thing called reinvention. Speaking for yourself as the key leader, how much energy does it take for you to start to move and shape other people's minds in this reinvention space?
A lot. It's hard. And it's understanding the different personalities, the different backpacks, as a friend of mine likes to call them. We all come with our own backgrounds and experiences, and understanding how someone's mind works differently than mine, how they move at a different pace, how they need different information in a different format at a different time than I do. So it does take a lot of energy to bring all of those diverse opinions, feelings, and thoughts together on this path. And if I can do nothing more than open their eyes to the thought and idea that there's a different way and that you should always be looking for something new and different, then the rest is up to them.
Can you explain a little bit of how you feel your energy in will start to produce different results and what some of that movement will look like?
Well, I think that in any endeavor like this, it's important to have the person with the passion also be a paid person. Well, oftentimes in my world, nonprofits, you find volunteers leading causes, and they can get pulled off for resources or time commitments. And it's important that there is one key person leading the charge and continuing to follow through and making sure that people are being held accountable. I like to equate it to a fireman. I'm not holding the hose, but I'm making sure that people are holding the hose and pointing it in the right direction. It's that backbone person that's calling people and say, hey, you said you were going to do this. Have you done it? How's it going? Did you think about this? And so because I have the capacity and a full-time position, I am able to not be the leader, not being the person in charge, but certainly being the one that has always had the eyes open, eye on the target, and making sure everyone is moving in the same direction and being held accountable.
How will you know when there's when movement starts to take place in the space that you are beginning to oversee?
Well, we're starting to already see things. Of course, we put metrics into place. We are a nonprofit and working with businesses, so SMART goals are very important. We track things the same way. We track the same things and we report on them. And so we have goals. For example, some of them are number of market rate apartments in our downtown area. We can see that happening. We can see the projects underway and new apartments coming online. We also have 3 restaurants opening in downtown Jackson this summer. So we see things happening. And then the more businesses we get engaged in the process, the more conversations we have, the more we see businesses evolve and invest, the more we'll see. Now, it's hard to take full credit for it. Not the chamber or myself, but the process taking credit for it. But it doesn't really matter, right? If we have a vision and we see it happening and we're getting there, it doesn't matter if I can say Pure Reinvention did that. I can say we opened their eyes to this. They did it on their own. I can't control that. But we will be able to see the end result getting us where we want to.
What are some of the barriers that get in the way of having the kind of movement that you and I would like to see happen?
Fear. Lack of knowledge about what is possible, fear of change, not having resources or thinking that they have resources, not being innovative enough to find resources and be resourceful. People get in the way of themselves, tripping over our own feet. Politics get in the way. So that is one thing the Chamber prides itself on. We're not only the facilitator for these conversations, but we're also the bridge. We can help you get over those hurdles. We can take you to the other side. We can hold your hand and make sure that any potential legislation or funding needs are taken care of so that the way is clear, the path is clear for you to get to where you want to go.
Now, what's interesting is that while you said you can be part of the energy, but somebody else has to do the actual ownership, you talked about the bridge, that there was a role for your organization or for you as a leader to work as a bridge. Talk about that bridge work, because I think in the separation there appears like that there's a gap. But what you just described for me is there's actually the opportunity to create a bridge between your energy and their ownership. What does that look like?
That's a really good way to phrase it. So, yes, we can't make someone do this work, but we can clear the way for them. And, the river running under it or the gap is the hurdle. And we can educate them. We can expose them to new people, ideas, and resources that will help them get where they need to go. We can't make them cross the bridge, but we can lay it out for them so that they have a clear, safe path to get where they need to go.
Tell me what you've learned with respect to PACE.
Well, I've learned this lesson multiple times, and I think I'll have to learn it again. Most recently, I want the Chamber to take on diversity and inclusion work. I think that there is an economic role for businesses to be not only diverse, but inclusive. And then there's the whole equity conversation on top of that. So I've been involved in this work for a few years. And I've been privileged to be part of many conversations with different people. And so I'm here, I'm ready. And I have to stop and remember, you aren't necessarily part of those conversations. So it's a reminder that when you start down a path, to look around you and see who's with you. And maybe there are people that should be there that aren't, and to reach out to them and bring them right in then, so that now I don't have to completely stop and backtrack and bring all these people quickly up to speed on work I've been doing for years. So the first lesson I learned is, okay, when you first get that little spark of this is something bigger than me, this is something that could go further, to stop, look around, who else needs to be here, try to get them to the table or into the conversation. And then as moving forward, constantly be aware, who else should I engage in this? Who else has a diverse opinion that I need to have access to? Because I certainly don't see all of the different ways of looking at a situation. And then when I am ready to act and move, again, stop, think what kind of information they might need. And I always ask, What else do you need to know to make this decision? And one of my other absolutely favorite questions is, what are we not going to do? What are we not going to be? Because that answers so many other questions and clarifies so that we're all on the same page and understand. So if the chamber is going to engage in diversity and inclusion work, what are we not going to do around diversity and inclusion?
You've mentioned those two words, diversity and inclusion, a lot. Why are we having so much trouble with those? I mean, the historical diversification included gender or ethnic background, but it's so much more than that. Why do we struggle with that so?
I think we surround ourselves with like-minded people and like thinkers. We were raised in families where most of us think the same. We have the same background. We eat the same food for dinner. And so unless we put ourselves outside of our comfort zone, which you asked me in the beginning, we don't get exposed to that diverse thought. And it's not only important, but it's vital if we're really going to move our communities, our country forward.
How do you use communication as a key tool in the reinvention process?
Try to use my 2 ears more than I use my one mouth. That simple saying that we're supposed to listen more than we talk. People want to tell their story. They want to be heard. So I think the smartest person in the room is the person who asks the best question. So asking questions and listening and hearing, and not just hearing, but looking at them and looking at their body language and looking at how they are responding. So yes, I like to provide information. More than that, I like to ask the questions and understand where someone's coming from as they process that information.
How many key leaders do you know who really possess that skill of really active listening?
In a handful. It's hard, and I wouldn't even put myself there.
Which then creates a huge opportunity for one who wants to be a key leader, especially a key leader in this new space of reinvention, to really take your advice and to listen and feel, right, the environment that you're working in. Because I'm going to guess, knowing you like I've learned to know you, that listening isn't necessarily about what you hear. It may be as important to monitor how you are getting the vibrations and the feelings that are coming from the conversation. Is that a fair? Because I think listening comes in a lot of different ways these days.
Absolutely. And people don't always say what they mean.
And how do we separate out what I hear are the words versus what I feel are the vibrations of the message you're really trying to send me? Probably a podcast for another time, how to interpret those vibrations. Mindy, how can people get a hold of you and understand more about your work that you're doing in Jackson County?
We are at jacksonchamber.org.
Mindy Bradish-Orta, leader with a vision. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mindy's a dynamo, isn't she, Mike?
You've got to, when you're in Mindy's presence, you are affected by her positive nature.
It's not just positivity, but just polish, poise, and progress. I guess she's got 4 Ps. Isn't that 4 Ps? I think 4 Ps, right? This is a girl that gets stuff done. And that was actually her pure reinvention step that she identified with, move.
And for a person who is the true professional, the ability to move things forward is really where you focus your attention, because that becomes the defining difference.
It does.
And
really
Mindy
does.
is that professional who can define that difference.
You know, what I liked about Mindy and her story is that while she is the one who pushes change and she's the driver, she doesn't want to do it alone. And she talked about the importance of having a goal, having an end vision, but scheduling in these checkpoints on your journey. So through that change initiative, to stop and look around and see who's still with you and who's not there that should be there. Instead of getting all the way to the end and you throw your hands up in victory that you made it and you turn around and look and you're the only damn person on top of the hill, right? So getting this buy-in and having a group effort behind it, even though she's the one driving it.
Jody, I think that also then brings up the next point, which is the person with passion should really lead the way, and where the role of volunteers fits into that role. We've talked numerous times about wanting to have volunteers who have passion, and I think that's an excellent thing to want to have. At the same time, are those volunteers being funneled through someone on your staff who is equally passionate, whose role and responsibility is to move the project forward, as Mindy reminded us?
Right, because that paid staff member has more capacity than a volunteer, potentially has more staying power, more consistency, and has more authority to hold people accountable, things that volunteers simply just by their very nature don't have.
And that's the move component. So that instead of having movement as a group of volunteers, which might be circular, right? Mm-hmm. We have a lot of movement, not necessarily in progress. We have someone on our staff who is equally vested in the passion, who then is responsible for taking that energy and moving it forward. And
pushing it forward.
And along that same thought, Mindy reminded us that while it's important for us to know who we want to be, it's also important to realize who we do not want to be.
And not just realize it, but talk about it, because change is hard and scary for a lot of folks. And so again, back to some of our previous podcasts where our first thought is that ability to think the worst or the scariest possible outcome. Mindy talked about the importance of communicating to all of your stakeholders what you're not going to be and what you're not going to do, and how that helps calm fear as well.
I think that's an excellent point. If you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it pure reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter @Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.